Was today Thursday. Happy Thursday. Thanks for being on. I know we still have some people jumping on and we are going to record also. I'm actually going to do a little bit of a quicker one today. And I know we were off on our times. I think some people were confused and thought that it started at 1, but didn't start till 1:30 today. So have to have several people watch the recording, but thank you guys for being on. So I had the privilege of being a part of a new group with John Maxwell and his leadership team called High Capacity Leaders. And it's not just people in real estate. In fact, it was very little people in real estate, but it was business leaders and owners of organizations kind of across the country that own and or operate and or are leading a large organization. And one of John's goals, he just turned 77 this week. And maybe just so I can have like a frame of reference, I assume you're on. The answer is yes, because you're on. But will you just type in the chat, yes, if you've like heard of John Maxwell and or read a book of his so that I can gauge, like, do we all know him on here? Okay. I know Kyle, you have. So one of John's goals of turning 77 this week is he wants to carry out a longer legacy. So he basically said in the group that even though people, die, when he does die, he won't really die because there will be people that will be carriers of his lessons, of his experience, of the teachings that he's done and accomplished. And so this group that I'm a part of is a big piece of that. And so I was able, Adam and I went to West Palm Beach, Florida. We were able to do a dinner and like a 2-hour Q&A the night before. And then the next day was like a whole day with John. We did a lot of Q&A. He shared some great lessons. I have 19 pages of notes, all of which we will not get through on this Zoom. However, I tried to go through and really pick out the key ones and the high points, and share a couple of stories with you that I got from him. And then if there's anything that you want to expand more on or you have questions about, just type in the chat and let me know. And then Linda and I recorded an episode on our podcast today that will air next Tuesday. That is kind of part 2 of this. And I share the whole lesson that he did because I didn't have time to do it on this Zoom today. So I wanted to kind of separate them. So next Tuesday, if you listen to the podcast episode on everything life and real estate, I shared the last lesson that he ended with, which is titled How to Get Out of the People Pile. And he gives 7 ways on how you get out of the people pile, meaning how do you separate yourself from everybody else? And he gave the example of if you were going to an event and there were going to be 1,000 people there, how would you stand out? Like what would make you different from everybody else? And so the 7 ways to get out of the people pile are going to be on the podcast on Tuesday if you want to go and listen to that. So I'm going to share with you all a couple of things prior that he started the day with. And the first thing he talked about is passion. This was the very first subject that he talked about. And so he opened by saying, when it comes to passion, basically, he said, the power of passion is huge. Passion will either, it'll take away all of your common sense. You're so caught up in what could be instead of what is when you're focused on your passion. Like you're not just in the day-to-day, you're focused on what could be because you have so much passion for it. He said, passion doesn't wait. If you have passion, you'll pass almost everybody around you because most people don't have any passion at all. And and that's very true, by the way. He talked about the difference between people getting in like a top 10% level versus a top 1% level. So he said, if you think about it, the top 1% of something is 100 times greater. Most people stop when they get in the top 10% because getting in the top 10% typically gives you everything that you would want or need in life. And so he said, you really kind of lose the drive to get to that top 1%. And he said, but if you put yourself where you need to be, everything else will come towards you. And you have to have passion to get to that top 1% instead of staying in that top 10%, which 10% is great, by the way. And some people might be totally okay to be in the top 10%. And that's okay. If you're like a 1%er and that's your goal, then you just need to know that there is a huge difference between top 10% and top 1%. He said, he really wanted everybody, like he challenged us in the room, ask yourself what you're passionate about right now. And he said, he really encouraged us to think about that. And he said, if you have to think about that longer than 5 minutes, then or longer than really like 3 minutes, I think he said, then you might have lost like your zeal for what you're passionate about. We should all be able to rattle off a couple of things right now. And I was actually thinking, like, last year, I kind of lost my passion around some stuff. And I could totally tell. I mean, 100%, and the people closest to me could tell too, by the way. And so it's really interesting. So if you ask yourself what you're passionate about, John shared this story, and it's really kind of long, but and I think I've shared this on Wednesday Morning Mindset before, but when he was a pastor back in the day, I mean, years and years ago, in a really small town in Ohio, he had a goal of having 300 people attend the church on one Sunday. And like everybody knew about it. Everybody was leading up to it. It was like the one thing that he was super, super passionate about was getting 300 people there on this Sunday. And so on the Sunday that it was supposed to take place, they did the, count of the people that were there. And there were 298 people that were there. And he was like, okay, well, I told you guys, I'm not going to preach until there's 300 people in the room. And so he said he walked from the front of the church, like off the stage, down through the aisle. Everybody was sitting like in the pews or in there, whatever. He walked out the back door. He went across the street, and there was a gas station across the street, and there was a couple that owned the gas station. And he said they were both there, and he looked at both of them, and he said, which one of you wants to be a hero today? And he said, so one lesson in that is you have to be really great at asking great questions if you're going to separate yourself from the pile. But he said that when he asked them, which one of you wants to be a hero today? He said that both of them said, well, we both do. And he was like, perfect. And so he said, I just need you to walk back across the street and just come into this church for like 30 minutes. That's it. And then you'll be the hero of the day. And he said they walked across the street. He opened the back door. Everybody looked and was gasping in awe as John walks these two people down the aisle. He goes and sits them to the very front, in the very front of the pew. And he said, everybody just starts clapping and cheering. And he said that it's a moment that he'll never forget, because that was what he was passionate about, then, and everybody could feel his passion. And so his purpose in sharing the story, as he said, if you aren't excited about what you're doing right now, then you need to be figuring out what's it going to take to get you excited again. If you're more excited about what you did yesterday than what you're doing today, you're in trouble. And so he said, so many people have lost the passion that we just really need to think about getting our passion back and figuring out what that is. So he said, right now, if you ask him, John, what are you passionate about? He said, I'm super passionate about 4 things: bringing people to Christ, because he's a person of faith, his High Road Leadership book that's coming out in April, mentoring people, and his public schools values curriculum that's going into all the public schools in all 50 states in the country soon. Hopefully it's already in 13, I think. And so he said, I know that those are my big passion projects right now. So one, I want to challenge you guys, and you might even jot it down if you know it, and if not, go back to it. But what are you passionate about right now? What are the things that come to your mind? And if you're struggling to think of things, then make note of that too, because you might need to really think about what it's going to take to get you re-excited about something again. The second topic he talked about after passion was mentorship, and how to really maximize mentorship. And actually, most people, I think, don't really have mentors or have a mentor. They might have mentors John was a mentor of mine way before I met him, because I'd read all of his books and listened to all of his teachings and, listened to his podcasts and all those things. And so I would have considered him a mentor before I actually ever met him. And you can have mentors that you don't even know or that you've never met. But he talked a lot about maximizing the power of mentorship in a one-on-one relationship. And he said that there's 3 things to do to maximize mentorship. Number 1 is prepare. So anytime you're going to meet with someone who could be a mentor to you, or you want them to be, or just even if you get a little bit of time with them, highly prepare on the front end. He gave the example of John Wooden, who is probably the most highly effective, influential basketball coach of all time. And he wanted John Wooden to mentor him. And so John said he finally got the opportunity to ask John Wooden, after he'd read, tons of his books, and he lived by his pyramid, John Wooden's pyramid of success, which I just, by the way, ordered on Amazon, 8.5 by 11 of it. Cause I'm I'm going to frame that and start to study that. the John Wooden Pyramid of Success. But he said he finally got to the point where he was able to get a lunch with John Wooden, and he flew all the way to California for what was supposed to be like a, I think, 30-minute meeting, 30-minute lunch. John said he prepared so much so he came up with 5 pages front and back of questions that he wanted to ask John Wooden. And so he said when they sat down at the lunch, you know, after he introduced himself, etc., he said that John Wooden, he said his goal was to build a relationship with him. It wasn't to go get an autograph. It wasn't to take a picture with him. It was to meet with him on a regular basis and to build a relationship with him. So he said when they sat down, John Wooden said, "John, do you have, I'm, glad to be here. Do you have any questions for me?" And John Maxwell said, "Actually, yeah, I have all of these." And he just pushed across, 5 pages of questions. And he said, John Wooden said, "Oh, well, we'll never get through those in an hour and a half." And so he said, "So let's just start with the first one." And John said that at 4:30 p.m. that day, so like 6 hours later, they were still together. And John Wooden looked up at John Maxwell and said, "Hey, we're not even through the first page of your questions yet. Do you just want to come back to my condo? We can have dinner and I can help answer, we can get through as many more as we can." And John said he was like, "Yes, it's working." And so he said that he did that. And then he said what began as like an hour and a half lunch, because John was so highly prepared on the front end, lasted, it began a 14-year relationship of mentorship that John Maxwell had with John Wooden, so much so that when John Wooden was dying in the hospital 2 days before he passed away, he actually wrote the foreword for John's book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. And it was like one of the last things that he did. And John Maxwell said that had he not had such a close relationship and a mentorship with him, that would have never happened. So he said, you really have to prepare. The second thing with mentorship, number 1 was prepare. Number 2 is reflect. So after you have the time with somebody, you reflect on all the things that you learned. So whatever questions you came prepared to ask, whatever wisdom they shared with you, then you reflect on all of that so that number 3, you can act. And so basically he said, you maximize mentorship and you keep people wanting to mentor you when you act on what you reflected on that they taught you. And he said, pick 3 things and go deep on those things and act on those. And that's how you get out of the people pile to be able to be mentored. He said, you have to pay a price to maximize mentoring. He said, what are you doing to stand out and to be different? The greatest way to personally grow your life is to be mentored. It is the difference maker. He said, when you bring your people around you with you, then you're 5 times greater to have a return because they're growing and learning too. I did talk about this on the podcast, but he talked about, and I cannot remember this person's name. I just wrote down Linda, but it's some big marketing guru in New York. And I can't think, it was like a big company and I can't think of who she was the marketing company with. But anyway, John mentors her and she called John, I don't know, last year or something, he said, and said that she finally got the opportunity to have a 10-minute appointment with Warren Buffett. And she'd had like on her list forever that she wanted to meet Warren Buffett. And somehow it finally came to fruition. Somebody made it happen. And so she called John Maxwell and said, like, if I can only get 10 minutes with him, should I go? Is it worth it? I'm getting on a plane, or what should I do? What's your advice? And he said, yeah, he said, my advice to you is figure out a way to stand out so that your 10 minutes turns into an hour. And so she was like, okay, great advice. So she said John said she went back and she Googled everything she could learn and, did all this research. And she found out all the stuff about Warren Buffett. And a small thing was that she found out that his absolute favorite beverage on the planet is cherry Coke. And so when she landed, she went and bought a cherry Coke. She got like a cup, bought a glass, put some ice in it. And then when she showed up for the 10-minute appointment with Warren Buffett, when they sat down, she brought out a glass with some ice, a can of cherry Coke, opened the cherry Coke, poured it in the glass and said, I heard that you love cherry Coke. And she said that he just lit up and that he was like, oh my gosh, I love a cherry Coke. And so she called John afterwards and said what was supposed to be a 10-minute appointment turned into an hour and a half mentoring session with this marketing lady and Warren Buffett. And she was like, wow, like the smallest thing, just her being intentional turned into something that now could be, hopefully a mentor relationship. So the purpose of me sharing that was John said, all it takes is something little, some intentional thought in the little things to do something for someone that surprises and pleases people. And that's how you get out. Yes, Daniel, that's crazy. That's how you get out. That's one of the ways you get out of the people pile. But that's such a great thing to do when it comes to mentorships. He said, who mentors you is just as important as what they say, because there's really a piece of them inside of you that you carry forever. And Sarah, you'll know this, like, you know, Linda McKissick has been such a mentor to me. And there's just like a piece of her that I feel like I just carry inside. When he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true. Because I like catch myself saying, oh, Linda taught me this, or like Linda knows how to do this or whatever. Sarah probably can think of all the bad things that I've done to her. That I've taught her. She's probably like, oh gosh. But it really is like a piece of them is inside of you, you know? And so you like who mentors you is important is what they say. And then he said, just know that you can never replace your mentor because they each bring something different. But mentoring is the only way to leave a legacy in people and for people because legacy doesn't happen without mentoring. So that the mentoring stuff was really important. In fact, what Adam's like largest takeaway of the 2 days was that he felt like he needed more mentors. That he just hasn't had. He's had some good mentors, but his takeaway, he left saying, I'm going to be intentional about going and finding some more mentors to like have a really, you know, long-term relationship with. He talked about family next was the topic that he talked about, and just investing in your family, making sure that you're making time for your family, being intentional. He didn't go like super deep in that. He just said that he's just very intentional. Like, for instance, for his grandkids, every single year for their birthday, on their birthday, he writes them a poem about the number of the age that they're turning. And so all of his grandkids know that every year they get a poem from him. And like he just said, he's intentional about that. Every year for Christmas, he and his wife give their grandkids and kids a trip because they believe in like experiences. And so he said, like, every year at Christmas, they have a intentional family tradition that they do, that wherever they're going on the trip, they buy ornaments that like have the place on them, and then they all open the ornament together, and the ornament, so that way they can keep the ornament. And so now their trees have all these ornaments of all these places that they've been, but they open the ornament, they know where they're going on their trip. And then John said, we all get up and I lead a Congo line around the whole house singing a song about the place that we're going on the trip. Like, just, it doesn't have to, you know, be anything special or big or cost anything. It's just being intentional about it. The next subject that he talked about is focus. And a lot of people, I think, asked questions around this, and it was really good because having like consistent focus, meaning you focus on one thing and then, you know, you get pulled in another direction, or you want to do this thing and then you're like, oh, but what about this opportunity now? Like, our focus is like, I don't know, I'll speak for myself. My focus is like that sometimes too. So there's a thing about consistent focus. And he said it's actually one of his greatest strengths, is having consistent focus. But he said the first thing is you have to know how to think correctly. And he said that, and he actually encouraged us to all go back and read his book, How Successful People Think, which I think I read that a long time ago, but honestly, I couldn't remember very much about it. So I put that on my list to go back. But he said in the book, there are 11 thinking patterns that teach you like how to think correctly, because if you aren't thinking correctly, then your focus is distracted. And so you first have to know how to think in order to have that high focus. But he said he has 8 things that he thinks about every day, and he keeps those thoughts top of his mind. But he has them like in front of him. And then he does like 5 certain things every single day. But he said he said, what you don't focus on will shrink. So just always remember that. If you're not focusing on something, it's going to shrink. He said, you have to put it before you or like in front of you, because there's power in staying with a thought. When you don't stay with a thought, it's because you typically have too much on your mind. That's 100% my problem. He said, you have to have people around you to take your thoughts and then run with them. If you're like a big thinker, if you think a lot of thoughts all the time, then you've got to have people that can run with the thoughts. He said, the more that you can pass off, then the more that you can add in. So if you're, if you feel like you're somebody that you think all these things and you want to do all these things, you have to have leverage to be able to pass those things off to somebody. Or if you're not passing them off, you're not going to be able to add more things in. He said, what you cannot do it when your schedule is so overloaded that you don't have any margins in your life. Like, we have to have more margins in our life and in our calendar to be able to stay focused, and focus on things. And then someone asked him the question, like, what do you do? I think it was more of kind of a spiritual question, but also like not, so the question was, if you're in a season of your life, like when either the enemy is attacking you or like things just keep happening to you that you can't stay focused, or like, bad things keep happening, or you get in a rut about something. And I shared this with Linda McKissick today. This is one of the best quotes I think I've ever heard from John. He said, that's an easy answer for me. He said, there's a quote that I've never forgotten. And the quote is this: there's an eagle in me that wants to soar, and a hippo that wants to roll around in the mud too. And I get to choose which one I want to be. And I was like, God, that's so true. Because some days, don't you just get mad about something and like you want to roll around in the mud about it, or with somebody, or, you're like, oh, I'm just going to get in the weeds with that, or on that situation, or with that person. And the difference is, I know, Josh, did you love that, by the way? I knew that you would love that. And the difference is, he said, you get to pick. There's an eagle in me that wants to soar, and a hippo that wants to roll around in the mud. And just never forget that, because you get to pick which one you want to be for the day. And I was like, man, that is so, so, so good. That was probably actually one of my favorite quotes that he gave, or that he said. The next thing he talked about is parenting, which I won't spend a ton of time on this, but he just said 90% of your parenting is worthless. He said the reason that kids like their grandparents so much better is because they feel like their grandparents have it all figured out and their parents don't. And that's so true. That made me laugh so hard when he said that. I was like, actually, that's kind of true. But he said that there's really only 5 things that they cared about for their kids. And they impressed these 5 things like over and over and over. And it was number 1 was attitude, because this is a choice. He said, like, no bad attitude in our house. Don't walk in the room and have your attitude bring somebody else down. So like, attitude was number 1. Number 2 was relationships. You have to know how to get along with people. If you don't know how to get along with people, then you're probably not going very far. And so it was really important for their kids, to know how to build great relationships and know how to get along with people. Number 3 was faith. They wanted them to have a relationship with God. Number 4 was generosity. If you have it, he said, then you can go really far. So they insisted on them being generous and helping when other people, needed it. And then number 5 was self-image. And he said it was really important to them. And honestly, you guys, I think like now, in the world that we live in now, it's probably more important than even it was when John was raising his kids, for us to be able to us to have, and to teach kids to have, a really good self-worth and a good self-image. And I'm actually really excited because I'm getting ready to start Jamie Kern Lima's Worthy book. I've been like waiting with bated breath for it to come out. Josh, did you get it yet? Yeah, I figured you did. I'm so excited because she talks a lot about that. I'm actually going to read it, and then I think I'm going to make Amelia read it for like $100 or something, just because I want her to, I want her to read it. But so he said, by the way, he said, anybody who has kids, like, you'll pay a price later for not dealing with them when you should. So you need to have a culture with your kids and with your family that like you can have uplifting and encouraging conversations, but also you can deal with issues when they arise, because if you can't do it now, then you'll pay a price for it later. The next thing he talked about was reflection. And he said, John has always talked about like the 2 things that make people successful are he calls them the bookends of success. And it's preparation on the front end and reflection on the back end. And he said, a lot of times we don't take the time to prepare on the front end, and we don't take the time to reflect on the back end. I probably am better. I'm really not great at either, to be honest, but reflecting is something that I've really worked hard on over the last couple of years, and still try to get better, because I'd pay all this money to go to all these things and take all these notes, and then like get back and get stuck in the weeds the next day, right back into the business, and not even reflect on what I took away. So I've really been intentional with that over the last couple of years, which honestly, a big reason why I like to teach and share with you guys is to add value to you, and because it helps me reflect too. And it forces me to make the time to do it. But he said, reflection means that you do it because you assume you didn't see the whole picture. You have to assume that you didn't get it all. And so you're reflecting to go back and say, okay, what did I miss? He said, you have to be more committed to what you don't know, and what you're missing. And he also said, reflection is the absolute best when it's with your team, your partner, your significant other, whatever it is. Anytime you can reflect, you can go to something and then you can reflect with someone else, because a lot of times, like, if Josh and I were to go, Josh would hear things that I didn't hear, and I would hear things that Josh didn't hear. And then like Adam and I did the same thing. So it's really great when you can experience and then reflect with someone also. Because he said you should always ask like people around you, hey, give me a read on what you saw back there. Or like, if I'm teaching, then afterwards, a couple people that I trust, I'll be like, hey, how did you how was the audience? Like, how would give me a read on what you think everybody was feeling? Like reflection, he says, the learning experience is way better if you actually take time to reflect, because reflection turns experience into insight. And so you have more insight on things if you can actually take the time to reflect on it. I forgot about there were two more things about passion. He said, if you have passion, yet it lacks common sense, meaning like you might be gung-ho about something, but your team or the people around you are like, that doesn't really make sense. He said, then it's because they don't really see the facts or data. So sometimes you have to be careful with your passion and make sure everybody else around you is understanding it. He said also, if your passion is true and good, then it's worth waiting to see if the team will go with you. If it's worth trusting, it's worth following. So take the time to explain it to the people around you, go slow, and let them see your passion. He said, if your passion is good enough to drive you, it's worth being tested. And so knowing what you're passionate about, like you might be tested about it, and that's okay too. The next thing that he talked about was the power of 5. And I've heard him talk about this before, but it's just such a great reminder. He said, everybody should have the power of 5, meaning 5 things that you do every single day that you never miss a day of, that leads you towards like that 10-year version of yourself, like that future best self version of you. For John, every single day, he reads, he thinks, he files, he asks questions, and he writes. And he does those every single day. Like on Christmas, he does them. On his birthday, he does them. On a random Tuesday, he does them every single day. And so he said, we all need to think about the power of 5 and really figure out like, what are those 5 things that if I did them every single day, they would move me closer to my 10-year future self. The next kind of topic that he talked about, there's so many. Oh my gosh. Okay. The next thing he talked about is leading up and like your gifts, basically. I don't know if this was really like a topic per se, but he kind of went on a tangent. It was really good. He said his biggest advice for younger leaders and people would be quit taking yourself so seriously, because it's not about you. He said, when you can lead people higher and older than you, it's the biggest compliment that you can ever get, because it says that they see value in you, and your approach is really important, meaning like you would sit beside them, not in front of them. You would experience things together. You would connect with them. And like, I even think about this with some of you that are younger, that have clients that, you're going to have maybe a higher age clientele or whatever. Like, I just know, I remember when I got my license, I was young. And it's like, I know many of you are too. Sarah, think about how young you were when you started. And when you're dealing with clients that are older and, more seasoned in life, sometimes it can be really intimidating. But he said, like, that's when you know that you're a great connector, when you can do that. And if you just come from a servant's heart, he said, take the same level of interest in every single person, no matter if it's a billionaire or if it's the waitress at a restaurant that you're at. Like, you should have the same level of interest in every single person that you come across, or that you come in contact with, because he said that's the great connector. Like, that's how you actually connect with other people. He said, don't show up and perform, just show up and take a journey together. Shrink the success gap is how you do it. So if you're, if you're leading people that are more successful than you or older than you, or you're working with clients that are more successful or more older than you or whatever, your goal is to just shrink that success gap. Because he said we just can't take ourselves so serious because we're one step away from stupid at all times. Which I think is hilarious, or like one thing away from a really stupid decision. But he also said we have to really remember that you are not that amazing. Your gifts are amazing. And so he said for people of faith, like God gave you those, they're actually on loan to you. So when people tell you that you're amazing, they're confusing you with your gifts. And he said those are two totally separate things. They're not the same. And he said that conversation of him hearing that from a mentor one time completely changed his life, because it's humbling to think like, man, I got this great gift of being a salesperson, or this great gift of being a people connector, or whatever it is. But he said, don't get yourself and your giftedness confused. Because he said, just always remember, to whom much is given, much is required. So the more gifts that you have and the more that you are given, the more that is required from you, which is super, super true. And sometimes can add, extra pressure. Oh, Regina, I just saw your question. John, here, I'll type it in the chat. He reads, thanks, files, asks questions, and writes every single day. Those are John's 5. And he said, when you're looking at your future self 10 years from now, what would be the 5 that, that you would do? Let's see the last thing. You're welcome. My pleasure. Oh, he talked a lot about high road leadership. His new book, High Road Leadership, is coming out. I believe it's coming out in April. It was supposed to come out at the end of the year. This is probably the book of his I'm honestly looking the most forward to out of any book he's ever written. I cannot wait, because I'm always trying to think, how can I take the high road? I'm not sure if I want to take the high road on this, but I know I need to take the high road. So like, WWJD, what would John do to take the high road in this situation? So I'm really excited about the book. But I'll just quickly give you the 12, but I don't have time to like explain all of them. And I don't know the explanation of all of them. He just gave us the 12 and then said, read the book. But the 12 factors of 12 characteristics of a high road leader. Number 1, and actually here, I'll try to type them in the chat as I do it. Number 1 are they bring people together. He said high road leaders bring people together. They don't divide them. Number 2 is they value everyone. They don't just value the people that they like, or the people that are the same political party as them, or the people that live in their neighborhood. Like, they value everyone. I never know how to spell acknowledge. I always have to think about it. The number 3 is they acknowledge their humanness. Not sure how to spell that either, but you know how to go. Remember, I'm from Kentucky. Number 3, high road leaders acknowledge their humanness. I don't even know if that's a word, but he said it that it is a word. So I guess it is a word. Humanness. Josh, is it? You're not sure either. You're from Kentucky too. What do you know? So he said that basically with that one, that they're authentic, that they're honest and authentic people. Number 4 is they do the right things for the right reasons. And he said that means that they have good motives. Like, they do the right things for the right reasons. Number 5 is they give more than they take. So he said that they're plus people. That's what John calls it. Like, they don't expect things when they do something. They give more than they take. They're a plus person, meaning they always add to everyone around them. They aren't just like a taker. Number 6 is they demonstrate emotional capacity. And he said that this is big for high road leaders, especially when they're under pressure. That they don't just have IQ, like they have EQ. They have emotional intelligence. They demonstrate emotional capacity. They know how to do things the right way under pressure. Number 7 is they place people before their own agenda. And this is place people before their own agenda. He said that candidly, he said, this is what's wrong with America. He said that I don't care what political party they were, if one person got up and said, like, I'm here to serve you, the people of America, above my own agenda or my party's own agenda. He said we would be we would be a better way to a better country than where we are right now. But he said the problem is that everyone has just served their own agenda. And he just said that that's not a characteristic of a high road leader. Number 8 is they embrace authenticity. And we kind of talked about that earlier with the humanness, but he said that they are who they are. Like, they're confident in themselves. High road leaders embrace authenticity. When they screw up, they say they screwed up, and, they come with a contrite heart and they apologize. Number 9 is they take accountability for their actions. Same thing. He said that they are highly responsible. They take responsibility. Number 10, and this is probably one of my favorite ones, high road leaders don't keep score. Meaning they don't, say, well, I did this for you, so now you should do this for me. Or, something along those lines. They don't keep score. They show up every day to give value. And then the next thing, number 11, is they live by a bigger picture. So high road leaders are they're focused on the big picture. They're not focused on the weeds of today. And you'll hear this from anybody that's highly successful. Like, they're focused on where they're going to be 10 years from today. They're not necessarily focused on today. Like, that 10 years is pulling them that way. And then the last quality of a high road leader, number 12, is they desire the best for others. Meaning, he said they want more for you than from you at all times. So they want the best for others. He actually encouraged, when the book comes out, he said, use this book as a mentoring book to your kids and to the people that you lead or people who lead others, so that we can all, learn how to be a little bit more, take the high road a little bit more. Sometimes it's definitely more difficult than others, but I love these characteristics. I think it breaks it down. Really, really, really good. And then let's see. Oh my gosh, there's tons of stuff. Oh, you know what? I had one typed on my, hold on. Okay, I had a note in my note that I wanted to share with you really fast too. Here it goes. Okay, yeah. He talked about, let's see. He talked about being consistent, and this is probably the last thing we'll end on. But he just said consistency is king. You've got to keep creating and writing if you want to be a writer for the long haul. You've got to keep learning and, pouring into yourself if you want to keep doing the job that you're doing for the long haul. You have to develop resources. But he said there is real power in consistency. And he said that's why you have to have a lot of passion, because it takes passion to actually be consistent. And he said that the more that you can invest in yourself now, it compounds over time. And so he said, like, right now at 77, over the last 7 to 8 years, he said he feels like everything that he's learned throughout his life has compounded really quickly. And so he feels like over the last 7 to 8 years, it's all compounded. And so now he needs to be passing that on and sharing that with other people. And so he said that that consistency is really, really important with that. He talked about, let's see, okay, yeah, that's about the people pile. It's a faith question. One second. Oh, somebody did ask him, I thought this was really good. He said, someone asked him, what do the really, really great ones have in common? And so he said, there are some people that are called to greatness. Don't mistake it. Like, God marked them and called them to their greatness. He said, career, is what you get paid for, but calling is what you were made for. And I really like that, because I think sometimes we don't really understand or take time to think about the difference of those two things. But your career is what you get paid for and your calling is what you were made for. So you really should know that, and hopefully they're in alignment. He said the great ones have a great culture. Like, they grew up in homes of greatness, not every time, but most of the time. Sometimes they had a head start. Not that they're better, but they just had an advantage of being in the right place with the right culture at the right time. He said the fastest doesn't win, but the person who starts first does. So just remember, like, a lot of the great ones, they weren't afraid to start. Like, they started something and they didn't wait for other people to do it. They had extreme passion, which we talked about. He said when a person has passion, they will overcome insurmountable odds, even if they aren't that gifted, because they have so much passion. A person never succeeds without a fire burning in their belly. And so he talked about passion, you guys, like, a lot. It was a lot of the time. And then he said it's important to learn how to be your own best friend, meaning like you aren't delusional about life, but you also know that life is going to be hard and you have to be able to be good at self-talk, like pumping yourself up. Because he said in here somewhere, I don't remember where it was, but he said something about like, if you have to motivate yourself, hold on, I'm going to find it. He said something about if you have to motivate yourself every single day, then you're like on the wrong track or something like that. Like he said, you should, or no, not, he said, if you need other people to motivate you, that's what it was. He said, if you need other people to motivate you, then like you're on a wrong track. Like you should be able to be passionate enough and consistent enough to get up and motivate yourself to be able to do things. Not that we all don't need like a little pick me up every now and then, but he said like we should be able to motivate ourselves. Oh, here it is. If you need the help of others to get motivated, you lost the game already. Okay, yeah, he said it way better than I said it, but that's it. And I love that. I just think that is so, so, so good. And then the last thing he said was great leaders encourage themselves. So if you don't get encouragement, that's okay, because you know that you can encourage yourself and you're still in the game. And I think that that's a really good quality for us to all have today, especially with social media. I don't know. I feel like there's just so much comparison and, you know, everything on social media now. So we've got to really show up and be our biggest fans, especially if you don't have other cheerleaders in your life. So actually, this is really funny. Josh, somebody messaged me and said, I like how you and your friends share each other's stuff all the time on Instagram. And I was like, we just don't know another way. Like we're each other, like we're all going to cheerlead for each other. But the DM was like that they were surprised kind of by that, you know, or like that they just thought that it was like, it was not a common thing. And I'm like, I don't know, that's just what we do. Like we cheer each other on. So I think you just have to be the people around you's cheerleader and be your own biggest cheerleader. That was a lot, y'all, but those were like my big takeaways. Yes. Oh, hi, Angie. My pleasure. Are you going to family reunion, Angie? Yay. Okay, good. Hopefully.
Yes, definitely. I'm excited.
Good. I didn't figure you'd miss it. I saw Rob's on a panel.
Yep. I'm leaving tomorrow and I haven't started packing yet, but we'll get there.
I haven't either, if that makes you feel any better, but I'm not leaving.
Well, good.
All right, y'all. Thanks for being on. Hope you got a good nugget from today, or maybe a couple. Have an awesome rest of your week, and I'll see you later. Thank you. Oh, let me see, Tracy. You said reflection turns experience into. Oh, she said humanness is a word. Yes, and she's also from Kentucky. Hold on. Reflection turns experience. Hold on, I have it right here. Reflection turns experience into insight. Yeah, Josh had it. Reflection turns experience into insight. That's it. Yep. Awesome. Okay. See you guys. Thank you. Bye.